Welcome back to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast, where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. And I'm so excited to say we're now partnering with intothewestadventures.com, an Irish travel company which have bespoke walking trips and tours all around Ireland and abroad. So I've been on trips with them to the Camino 4 times and also been on their Irish walking weekends in Cork, Antrim, the islands. And I'm so excited that we have joined together to celebrate meaningful connections, finding a new path in our lives, and overcoming adversity. So please do go and check out intothewestadventures.com. I'm so grateful to everyone that is listening and supporting us for these meaningful conversations that address all topics. So thank you for joining us, and let's move on to our latest episode. So my guest today is Sean Blake, married and a father of 4 children from Swords in County Dublin. Sean has an amazing story which he has been sharing very openly on RTE and social media in the last while. And I connected with Sean through seeing his story. And we're so delighted to welcome him to share a little bit more about himself, where he is and his recovery. Sean, you're very welcome.
Oh, thanks very much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
Well, do you know what, Sean, as we were saying beforehand, I think it's so important that real people are coming out. It's not just out of a book or you're seeing the statistics, but you're hearing from real people that are struggling or have struggled in the past and where they are now and how your story can help support and encourage others to come forward or to speak out or to go towards treatment that they need or deserve in this moment. So, Sean, your story is a recovery from anorexia
Yeah.
and we spoke about you raising awareness and being on social media. What was it that brought you to the point, and we'll go right back to the point of knowing you were suffering with anorexia?
Well, for many, many years, I didn't know, obviously, and I just went along with it. And my wife actually had discovered it. She kind of knew. And I went to the GP, and at that stage, I hadn't kind of admitted it myself. And the GP was just kind of was like, "Oh, it's just me being healthy." So I went back a couple of years, and it seemed like it's very hard to remember a lot of it at that time. But I suppose I got to a point where it controlled me so much that I just realized, obviously, look, I wasn't able to do things. I wasn't able to engage with my family. I wasn't able to do simple things like have a picnic, go out for food with them. And I always, like, running was a big part of my anorexia. And I always remember being out one night. I used to get up at 5 in the morning, and I remember being out one night running past. I remember exactly where I was. I was like, there was a pharmaceutical place up here in Swords. I remember I was just running, and I just kind of started crying because I was like, how am I going to stop this? Like, because I knew then I couldn't stop it. Like, and as much as it brought me down then, and brought me to tears in the middle of the night running, I knew I couldn't stop it. So as much as I wanted at that point. So, and then I kind of, it's funny to pinpoint one because it became like, I suppose I was maintaining it because I do certain behaviors that I'd be doing, and I know why I was doing it. And I often listened. The great thing about lived experience is I started to listen to podcasts, and I would hear people talk about their experience when they're in recovery from anorexia and things they used to do, and like they were things I did. So it was a lot of different things came together, and like one thing that I have talked about a few times, I kind of didn't mention it a lot though. I used to do a thing where I would walk into, let's say, a shop, and I would walk around the shop, look at food, and I'd never have any intention of buying it, and that just became so normal to me. Like that became like I dropped my little girl off for ballet Malahide on Thursday, and I would go, and my next thing would be when she was in there to actively go down to a place down there and just walk in and you'd look at the food, the bread and all that, and knowing I wasn't going to buy it. And I suppose that just became my everyday. Like, so I knew then, but it was just living life because I knew I couldn't stop it. And it was really like it was all those little bits came together. And then there was one day it just got really bad for me, and I was just so tormented with it that I said it to my wife Edel, and she kind of from there kind of said, look, we'll get help, and but she knew, and I suppose she was frustrated because she knew this years ago, but obviously I hadn't admitted it, and medical people had told her it wasn't, you know what I mean? So yeah, it got to the stage. I suppose I got to a stage where it was like just like being a zombie, really. Like I couldn't do anything. I don't think I could taste anymore. I couldn't, like, the whole hunger was gone. Like I didn't actually feel hunger anymore. I couldn't, my sense of smell and everything had gone. So I was just existing. And at that stage, it was, I knew I needed help. Like, but for many years I didn't. And yeah, I kind of always describe it for me in three stages, and it was that beginning where it all starts kicking in, and you start with the healthy buzz, and it's all you're great, it's great, next getting into the running and the exercise, and eventually, slowly, things get cut out, food choices, and like I've often said before, like it was based on things like calories, counting calories, and I've always said I've no idea what a calorie was. Still don't really know what it is. I know by definition. I don't know what X amount of them look like, but that's what basically you're told in society is less calories the better, and everything is low calorie and low sugar and everything. And I honestly think the majority of people don't have a clue what it really means, and that just eventually went down to over time and just caught me, and everything was going down. It was getting a hold of my brain more, and I was being pushed down further and further in my body. And yeah, I just lived for it. And yeah, and when you look back, it's so strange that you are functioning, you're maintaining it, but and you become aware you're doing it, but you can't stop it, like, So you're just living for that. And yeah, the point when I just went in and sat on the couch and said it to my wife, and then after that, we went to the GP again, and now it took a little while after that even to be kind of convinced that there was a problem. And yeah, and I kind of, there was a bit of to and fro, and I went to a therapist who basically told me I needed help. And from there, I got involved with St. Pat's mental health services, and I ended up as an inpatient in their eating disorder ward. So that was tough. It's really tough, but the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, Sean, thank you. Yeah, it's because we had Connor Nolan here on the podcast a few weeks
I know
ago as
Connor,
well,
yeah.
and yeah, and he spoke about you as well, and how it's lovely that there's other men in particular talking about this, because one of the things we said is his in the past being generically associated with young girls or women, whereas more and more men now are talking about suffering or being diagnosed with anorexia. And a lot of it is coming down to body image, and that just as you've spoken about how we should look, what the right weight looks like for men. It's the six pack, the healthy option. As Connor said, he was only a young lad and he was diagnosed at 12. I mean,
Yeah,
it's shocking when you hear it. Absolutely shocking that he just was healthy. And like you, it started out with the running, and
yeah.
cutting out certain things, but how it developed. If you go back in your life, Sean, did you ever suffer with any kind of mental health issues? Were you an anxious child? Did you worry about things easily? Yeah, you're nodding your
Yeah.
head. Because
Yes.
again, it's not to stereotype, but if we look at, and I'm talking about myself personally as well, and in any case where there is, issues later on, we'll say that maybe there was something, that we were worrying or stressed or over emotional. Did you feel that as you were growing up, Sean?
Yes, 100%. And it's funny, only when I'm coming in, someone asked me last week, like, how was I sick for long? And I paused for a second and I said, like, do you know what? I think pretty much all my life. And when I go back to as far as when I remember as a primary school, I was always very anxious, always really big worrier, like really big worrier. I didn't have a great time in my primary school, so I often remember like being incredibly anxious going in. I missed a lot of school. I think I missed 45 days one year. Basically, it was strict. There was teachers. I had on 2, 3 occasions teachers who hit me. Now, very late 80s, 90s, and it was horrible. And the anxiety, yeah, I always remember having that anxiety, and I always remember having it my whole life. My attitude was that I was no good. I was no good at anything. There's no point in trying or trying to get in because you're never going to be successful with it. And as I kind of grew up, I never really went for playing any teams or anything like that. And it developed up until like I hated myself, like I absolutely hated myself. And even in my when I was 19, I met my now wife, Edel. I found I would have drank then, and when I look back now, my drinking was always about uh, just forgetting. It was about like the other people I'd be going out with would go out, have a bit of drink. They go out for different reasons. For me, it was just about getting as I can, as getting and I don't drink anymore now. But there was always something there that I was always trying to just forget, and I would all the way up through 20s, 30s. The level of hate I had for myself was shocking. Like I had no faith at all in myself. If anything went wrong, I would blame myself. Completely my fault, as far as I'm concerned. I would, I would self harm. I would, you know what I mean. I would hit like myself even because of that. There was so many stages of my life when I look back now that I did things, and the level of hate, and it's only now I can look back and see that. And the thing about the anorexia is, and a lot of when people talk about males with eating disorders now, it's always towards like the six pack and the. For me, during my journey with anorexia, if someone had said to me, "Oh, you're looking fairly stocky or something," that would have been end of days for me. Like for me, it wasn't about that. It was about wasting away. Ultimately, at the end, it was about disappearing. And again, this is something that I suppose you don't hear people saying a lot, but I do know because I've talked to a lot of people. I wanted to look sick, so I wanted to look as sick as I possibly could. That was where what my goal was. My goal was to just completely disappear. And like I said, if anyone, for me, the thought of being like having a six pack or anything like that, or being muscly or whatever, that would have been my worst nightmare. Like if someone had said that to me, it would have been just so. With my anorexia, I don't think it was body image as such, because I didn't want to look in any way. I just wanted to be, sick. And towards the end, it was literally just about disappearing. It was running to disappear. Uh, and I suppose it started off with, because I did go through a stage years and years ago when I was probably in my 20s about bulking up and all that sort of stuff. And again, that only came back to me fairly recently. And again, that brings me to, it kind of reminds me that there was something going on because it was about trying to change me. And when I got into the doing a bit of running and stuff, you get the usual comments about it and you get congratulated on it. And I suppose what happened was then I didn't want to drop that because I found something I was actually good at and people like me for. So the thoughts of that going, and the problem with it is what happens if someone says to you, which they do, "Oh, you look great, you've lost weight." The next time you're thinking, I have to work harder at this because if I see them the next time and they don't say anything to me, that means that the opposite happens. And then it just gets to the point where everything starts getting in on you. Like I had people who would just say to me, "God, you're not looking well" or whatever, and that to me was like that's what I wanted to hear. And then the way that eating disorder mind goes, that you think, all right, the next time I see them, if they don't say that to me, it means I'm looking better. So I better work harder to it's all I know it sounds, but that's what it does to your brain. And
Mm.
in my case, that's what it was. It was just, and the social isolation comes in then, and you don't want to see people and doing something simple like going into the office because I suppose it would have been around COVID times, and after that, like 2, 3 weeks before I planned to go into the office for like 2 hours or something, I would be going into an absolute overdrive of everything, just purely because I'd be seeing people, and yeah, I pretty much so socially isolated completely so much over the years, pushed a lot of people away. and it's got that underlying uh, pain, and that's what I always try to get across, that it's not about weight, it's not about food.
No.
Uh, but yeah, and look, anxiety plays a major part for me. I work on that. Again, I'm still kind of dealing with sympaths, and I look after that sort of thing. But anxiety was huge for me, and for the first time in my life since I started recovery, it's the only time I felt okay, and I've pretty much liked myself. So
Well,
yeah,
we like you too, Sean.
yeah,
We
thanks.
like you too, and we're delighted to have you here sharing. And you know what hit me with that, because there's so much in it, as I said, and thank you for sharing so openly, is the disappearing, wanting to disappear. I could completely resonate with that because, again, when I was going through anxiety and depression, and I wouldn't have said, and in my head, I would have said, I don't have an eating disorder.
Mm,
But if I hear more stories now, I kind of go, maybe you did, Sharon. Maybe that was
mm,
part of it as well, because we don't recognize it. We mightn't understand the terminology. But the disappearing, that was what I felt like I was disappearing slowly. And when I did eventually break down, it was like I shattered into a million
mm.
pieces. So absolutely, I understand where you're coming from. And I'm sure there's people listening that have struggled in their own life or maybe struggling, and they may understand that. And it's important for us to be able to say those things because it may not be spoken out loud by others. But again, we have to be honest with how we felt, don't we, within ourselves? And then that helps other people. And this is interesting as well, you were talking about your lovely wife, Elaine, and you met her, what, at 19, was it?
We were no, Edel. I met her when we
Yeah.
were 19. I met her in Quinn's pub from Condra, if anyone knows it.
Lovely.
So,
And the fact that she liked you or fancied you,
yeah,
and even that not being enough, and I'm talking about personal experience, that we have someone that is so wonderful, so beautiful, so kind and loving, and they love us, but we still don't believe we're worth that love. Was
yeah,
that what it felt like for you?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I up until like up until I started my journey of recovery, I was always like I was waiting for the catch. I was always like what are you doing with me? And I was always waiting for it to, you become nearly self-destructive in the whole thing. You're nearly causing more hassle and more stress by you're just expecting it to happen, because it's a real case of you're waiting for the punchline here. Like there's no way happiness, or why would this person want to be with you?
Mm.
And the funny thing is, like she's a primary school principal now, but she was in St. Pat's College at the time. And as I said, my primary school experience was awful. And the fact I met a primary school teacher in training, all the people at my wedding were primary school teachers, and I got married in the church in St. Patrick's College, teacher training college. So I don't know, but
The irony
yeah,
of it all.
I know, and I did find it very, up until not all that long ago, I found it very hard to even go into her school, because it just primary schools just didn't. And but there's that completely. Yeah, I was always like, why is she with me? I'm like, and I was expecting the worst to happen to so many better people out there, and you know what I mean. And of course, she stuck with me. Lucky enough, if I hadn't have had her, I probably wouldn't be here where I am. So I'm thankful that she stuck with me through everything.
Yeah. And I always say that sometimes our partners, or if you're in a relationship and you're feeling like, what do they see in me? Maybe they see in us something we can't see in ourselves or we've
Mm.
never seen in ourselves. And they're there to show us that we're worth loving and we deserve to have that love in our lives. So, yes, I think not that you were lucky to have her, but I think that she was nearly like that earth angel. I call those people that they see something within you that they love so dearly and they're trying for you to see it yourself. But
Yeah.
I'm sure even going through that and Edel loving you so much and seeing you struggle must have been extremely hard for her as well. Were you feeling guilty about that? Was that another thing you put on yourself through this?
Um, I suppose the thing about when I was going through the eating disorder stuff, it takes so much that I suppose, like being honest about it, you don't really. you don't notice everything else because it takes so much from you. And I suppose gets to the stage with me that I just wanted to, I wanted to die pretty much, because the reason behind that was because I just felt like I was such a burden on her and the kids and stuff, and I just felt like they could do so much better, so they'd be better off without me, and that's what it did. That's what it does to me. Did to me, and up until that point, I suppose it just takes so much. You don't have time to be thinking about. You just think everything's great outside. You know what I mean? And I see now, like, the trauma, I think, of someone, a carer, effectively watching someone dying, is massive. Like, it's something I hope I never have to understand. In the same way that a lived experience, I suppose, of someone with an eating disorder, unless you've lived it, you probably don't understand it. It's the same for a carer. Like I can't even imagine looking at if I was in that situation, and it's so like. Edel said, and I was at a thing last week, and someone said something the same thing. But Edel used to check me in the middle of the night to make sure I was still breathing. That's how bad it was. You know what I mean? And I was only out last week, and someone said something similar, that their parents are about themselves, and it just reminded me that was something she used to say all the time. Like, and it's just so awful. Like,
No. But again, look where you are now, and I always say we just look back to see how far we've come and to share the experience, but to not dwell on where we were, but where we are now. And as I said, you are doing such great awareness through social media and even on the program, the RT documentary, Anorexia, My Family and Me. And we were talking about before we pressed record how you weren't as anxious about doing that as you are
yeah.
your social media posts. How was it though, doing that documentary and knowing that the wider world or the wider
Mm.
Ireland would see your story? Was it something that you had hidden or were you very open about it at that stage?
Uh, I suppose, yeah. The documentary was like, because I'll be honest with you, like, I lived a life where I was afraid to speak. I always had to head down. I cared. It was always about what people thought of me. And when that happened, I met Alan, the producer from that's Alan Bradley, and like straight away I kind of got that sense from him. He was so nice, and he told the story. So he was so kind of sensitive about everything, and it was tough. And we did the interviews and stuff like that, and I was very open. I was very open because I felt like I have an opportunity here. There's a lot of different reasons. I have an opportunity here to fight back for myself, like, and I see it as fighting back against all that from the past and just giving it all, And it was also to get it out there about raising awareness of eating disorders, and because it's not something that is widely obviously understood. And when I was kind of, as we spoke earlier on, there was podcasts and different people telling their experience that kind of got it with me. And yeah, I was very, very open, and there was some things I wouldn't have talked about, and some things I haven't ever talked about. But I would have been very open about what I did and different things, and I just thought it was important because it really, really helps me too, and it's helping me as much as helping other people is why I do it. You know what I mean? And so it was very, very strange because I kind of knew that, like, I was very open when I went back to work. I told everyone uh, what it was, and stuff like, and I only think I told people about the documentary maybe the week before, and I was looking at kind of, oh, I'm going to go back into work and people are going to see me being extremely vulnerable. And, I got nothing. I've never had any negative feedback. Everyone
Mhm.
was really good. And I just had positive kind of feedback from it. And like the way I kind of look at it is that I went through a whole life of being ashamed in some way. And I'm not going to be ashamed. For me, I'm not being ashamed of eating disorder. And I've said it before, I'm actually proud where I am, and I'm proud of speaking out because it did so much harm to me. I'm not letting it shame me. You know what I mean? So I like to call it out. Uh, so yeah, the documentary was extremely positive. And you know what? Making connections with people was huge because I wouldn't have been great socially before, and I got involved with a lot of stuff like Shine, uh, and mental health organisations like that, and Shine in particular, like, have been amazing in my recovery because I've been able to become part of the ambassador program on a voice platform, and I'm on the reference group for the NIMIC reference group, and just that connection of meeting people and the opportunities they've given me to, like, I actually love speaking to people now, and I've gotten so many opportunities for it. So, uh, it's amazing to just be. I can't recognize that person. Sometimes I see that old person standing beside me, and I'm like, how did I ever hate myself so much? So it's pretty good, like, what I mean, to be where I am. And the documentary certainly is not somewhere where I thought I'd be when you turn on the television and you see yourself up there. Even like the Sky Planner now, the picture and stuff, and the ads, and then like my little girl the other day, an ad came on, and she's just like, "Oh, there you are again, Daddy," and she was gone off then back in the kitchen.
Uh,
You
do
know,
your children understand, have you spoke openly, especially with the documentary and everything? How do you explain? I know in the documentary it was like, them looking at you eating and you vet
mm.
today and going on the picnic, which was so lovely. I love that openness. But how did you feel explaining that to your children for the first time?
I told two older kids because they'd understand it. The two younger probably wouldn't understand it as much at the time. So I felt, yeah, I was a bit anxious about it, but telling them about it, I just thought was important, for obviously because of what I've gone through, but also just trying to communicate to them about when they're feeling anything negative or whatever it is, or they're, to talk about it, because bottling it up is the worst thing they can do. And I kind of explained it to them that, like, it's not about, it's not about the food, it's not about it, so they understand. They're a lot more mature about that sort of stuff. Like, it doesn't really phase them, and they are very aware of it. So I just thought it was so important. It was difficult, obviously, to tell them, but, and they do ask me questions still, like all the time, about
Mm,
it and about eating disorders and stuff. And I suppose the strange thing for my kids would have been that they didn't know me to eat. Like, I used to just eat. Like, I would have got to the stage where I just ate the same things every day, and the exercise. So when I started to get involved more, one of them said to me, "Oh, I just thought that, that you just ran and ate the same thing every day, so you didn't eat this." So they wouldn't have known me as such for eating like they did. They just knew
mm,
me because that's the way they remember a lot of the earlier. So it was more unusual for them to see me actually getting involved,
yeah.
uh, which they're getting used to now. And yeah, the two older ones, it is great because I think it's really important to be open about these things, because I mean that, I know, I think you might have Dara Fleming on, and
Yeah.
I remember hearing his story years ago, and he talked about how important it is to be open amongst the family, because everything that happened there, he was able to uh, to talk about that, and like, if I can only imagine how hard that would have been otherwise. So it's things like that that spur me on to kind of make sure they do speak up, because if they're afraid to speak up or embarrassed or something like that, it just can go so wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was heartwarming to see, because again, I suppose maybe in Ireland and maybe it's in many other countries, there is a lack of communication or openness within going back generations. I think we're becoming more open now. But when you are going through something that is so overwhelming, sometimes it's hard to find the words to express how you're feeling. You're doing a great job now, Sean, of trying to explain how you are. But even so many things you said, going into the shop and just looking at the food with never an intention to buy anything, controlling what you were eating, wanting to disappear. Again, there may be families or a parent listening to this podcast today, and they have a little bit of worry or concern about a partner or a child or a sibling. And again, maybe they thought, oh, that was just the way they always were,
Mm.
you know. And maybe they're questioning that now. Maybe there is health issues for that person going on. And it's something I think that we all need to be more aware of and not just ignore. And especially as we said with you, you were an adult, when this really got to its worst level. Connor, who was on a few weeks ago, was only 12. before his
Yeah,
mother said there's something wrong. And as he said himself, he was screaming inside, I'm terrified. But he couldn't find the words. He just said, I'm fine, which a lot of
yeah.
young kids will say, I'm fine. Will you stop? Leave me alone. What would you say to anybody that is out there that is a little bit concerned about someone in their family or friend group, and they're kind of getting the feeling there is more going on? What would you suggest they
I
do or say?
I would learn as much information as possible because obviously, like we talk about anorexia and restrictive, there's obviously there's many different types of eating disorders like binge eating disorder, and some of them like I think a lot of people are when they hear eating disorder straight away they're thinking, oh, it's they must look a certain way, whereas this eating disorder is a sneaky thing about them. That's not the case. Like and so I would say to anyone just to get the basic information even on things like from Body Wise and like Beat UK, and there's in Australia they have I think it's National Eating Disorder Centre, I think it is, and they have really good information. So I get the basics of the signs and symptoms of things, and it's really important to be sensitive around it, obviously, because the one thing that people won't be able to do is you can't just tell people to eat, and
Mm,
that's not going to work. And one thing that my wife knew that was the case. So she, rather than, you could drive people much deeper into it. You have to get real professional kind of advice on it in that way. But it's really important early days, I think, to catch it, because for me, I definitely think if I had caught it earlier, it might have made a difference. But it's catching on to it, as I said, and getting that early help, and just knowing the signs and symptoms. I think it's so important, and I'm always trying to get the awareness out in sports clubs and running and things like that, because the signs, although to me are so obvious. I mean, I can spot it a mile away. I mean, like I I'd be in a shop and I could see someone, and I honestly know by the way they're picking things up and looking at things that I can look in their basket. I know exactly, like, you know what I mean, what it is. But and I do understand most people don't, but I do think you can spot things when it comes to exercise, when it comes to sports and things like that, and diet, and a lot of it goes down the road as well. If people were looking at their kids, if they start like experimenting with like everything being low calorie, veganism, vegetarianism, stuff like that, a lot of that comes into play as well. So it's kind of looking for those type of signs. Uh, and like if like for me, certainly I started off like, not having full dinners, and I'd have something else, and then like you might complain about pains in your stomach, and you don't want to eat because you have pain in your stomach. And then a lot of the time as well, it'll be like people will over exaggerate what they've had, and they'll make sure that people around them know. Let's say I come home and I'd say, "Oh, I've had it loads today. I'm full." You know what I
mm,
mean? And then talking about things you love, and oh, I love pizza, and I love, this sort of thing, kind of like. So it's to put that out there that no, I'm okay. You know what I mean?
mm,
So it's definitely, it's really important, if you think there's any signs of it in someone, is to get the right information. Make sure you're saying the right things, because like words, when it comes to eating disorders, words
mm.
can be so important, because one thing you say to someone can just drive you. Uh, like telling someone they look well is bad.
Yeah.
That's really really bad. Like you might as well just be, that's the worst thing you can do.
Mm,
So it's important to get the wording and just to be as sensitive around it as possible, because it's such an evil illness. And
mm,
yeah, like I say, there's a lot of information out there on the signs and symptoms, and it's one of the most important things, I think, is to catch that stuff early and try and get the help when you can. Now I understand the health service is not always available, but if you can catch it early enough, and therapy, because in my own case, it's something much deeper. That's what it is. If you can get
mm,
to the bottom of that, it might help,
yeah.
you know?
And again, there is an underlying issue or an emotion that is present. And even the child, and we'll talk about children may not be aware and they might not have the emotional intelligence to be able to express that, So again, for parents, and I believe as a parent myself, it's if there is a worry, to research and find out the information, go to a source that is reliable information, that you're not just listening to somebody else down the road,
Yeah,
that hasn't a clue. It's really getting the professional information and being open and trying to keep the communication open between you and your child, especially, or your partner or sibling. But again, for me, it's about, and again, we can blame social media and everything else, but when I was saying this to Connor, it was like when I was growing up, there was no social media. We had only two channels. We didn't have money to buy magazines or newspapers, so we weren't looking at other people outside of ourselves. We were comparing ourselves to our friend groups or the people in school. So it was going on even then. And I remember years ago, Sean, and this is amazing. I met somebody that I went to school with probably after 10, 15 years of secondary school. And she said to my face, she said, "Oh, you look great now. You were a bit chubby in school." And
yeah,
I remember thinking to myself, was I? And then I
yeah,
really, it played on my
yeah,
mind.
yeah,
And that's what people don't realize, their words have such an effect on us, even
yeah.
as adults. And you're so right. And people looking at others and saying, "You look great. Did you lose weight?"
Mm.
So the losing weight is the thing that made them look great. So that becomes, as you said, in your running, a factor for, "Oh, I must lose more." I know yours went deeper than that.
Yeah,
But again, for all of us to be aware of it when we're saying that there is all different types of body shapes and sizes. And it's encouraging that, especially in our young people, to say, to accept yourself as you are, and that no matter what society or someone else says, to love yourself as you are. That's what we're trying to teach our young people in particular, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
And even around the nutritional side, it's something I feel that needs to be looked at a little bit more, starting at a very young age in school, about it's not about the diet culture, or, it's about the good foods that are going to energize our body, that are going to make us feel good, what works best in our digestive system, what proteins we're getting from foods, what you like, and encouraging people that way, and not to say don't eat this and eat that, because we're being bombarded constantly. You go into the shop and the advertisements are everywhere, and you're looking at everything. And for you, it must have been a complete nightmare, Sean.
yeah. And you know what? Like, and the thing about it is, it is that gets you so far down to barely only eating the safe foods because you're looking at all that. And it's exactly, I do feel very strongly about what you just said there about the from a very young age. Like if you look at schools, the way the schools are kind of with the healthy eating and everything, and like you have kids coming home asking how many calories are in something, how much sugar is in something, and I just think, like, I get, like, it is important, obviously, nutrition, but I think there needs to be more thought around a balance and stop vilifying things, because you have kids who think they're bad because they have a little bit of chocolate, and then
Yeah.
you get kids who will compensate them for that. They get anxious because they think they did. And I personally think it needs to be led from the top. I think it needs to be a state run standardized,
Mm.
because at the moment all that happens is, usually these things go to the Department of Education, who then say, oh, it's up to each individual school principal and board of management. And school principals and board of managements, they're not like nutritionists, dietitians. They're expected to know everything, and you can't expect that. So I think, as a national policy, I think it needs to be looked at and it needs to be standardized. And, like, it's just some of the horror stories I've heard of what certain schools will have as part of their healthy eating policy. And I've heard of a few schools who actually have, I think they have dietitians on who happen to be on staff, and their approach to the whole thing is completely different. And the so-called bad foods, like that, a lot of places will say you can't have, they actually allow, because they have qualified people who are like, well, no, like, this is more important and it's more dangerous to be vilifying foods.
Mm.
And, like, even like workplaces, that you mentioned there, like, workplaces are a nightmare for it, because you get a lot of the corporate, in particular, wellness programs, I think, and they always focus on losing weight. They always focus on good and bad foods and step challenges and all this. And I've seen environments when you get that. You get people passing comments on each other and stuff like that. And like that does affect some people, you know. And I
Mm,
think there needs to be more awareness, as you say, around that.
mm,
That just don't comment on it. Like you don't need to be doing that. And I would love to see wellness in general as well-being and corporate programs just to have even a 10-minute introduction to eating disorders. Like like the Mental Health First Aid Ireland youth course covers it, and it's brilliantly covered.
mm,
So it's so important, like, because words matter, as you know. And
mm.
yeah, I definitely think, like, I always have the approach with my kids that there's no there's no bad foods, you know. And what my kids like, we'll go into like, they don't really comment. Like, we go into a shop or supermarket, like, they don't look at so-called things that they shouldn't have and fixate on it, and they're not going to have this, going to have it, because it's just normal to them. You know what I mean? So they
Yeah.
don't sit there all day because they know it's not a restricted thing. So I think they're a bit more relaxed about it. That, like, oh, like, I can have chocolate if I want, but I'm going to
Mm,
eat like my dinner, and I might
yeah.
have it later on because they're allowed that kind of, So,
Mm,
and it's not a big deal to them. So, and it
yeah.
works. It works for me anyway. For us.
Yeah. And I think it is. It's all of this. And again, we're listening more to what's right, what's not right. But what's right for you may not be right for me. So we
Yeah.
can't be all put under the same label. And one of the things that I was reading lately is, according to Bodywise, an estimated 188,000 people in Ireland will experience an eating disorder.
Yeah.
That is a huge number for a small country. And
Yeah.
that's just the number that they're aware of.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, eating disorders, restrictive eating can look very different and it can be controlled.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, Sean, we feel like we can control nothing else, but this is something we feel we are in control of.
Yeah.
We're not, but we feel we are. And there is many people out there that feel they are, oh, sure, I'm fine. I eat this. I know what I'm eating. I plan out my meals. I do my exercise and I feel good. But that's kind of, I suppose, an illusion in their own head, isn't it, as well? And I'm not talking about everybody now. I'm talking the
Yeah.
people that maybe are struggling and have had some issues. And if there is a thing that they're not sure why they're doing it and they're not feeling good and they do want to isolate themselves. It's things to consider. Am I doing this for the right reason? Is this making me feel good? Because I'm very much about that, Sean. If
Yeah.
something doesn't make me feel good, I'm kind of going, I'm not sure if I want to do that now because I
Yeah.
want to feel good. And I would often say to my online members, I'd say, if you want that square of chocolate, have that square of
Yeah.
chocolate.
Yeah.
Stop denying yourself the pleasures of life because that's where we start going a little bit awry in ourselves, isn't it? By
Yeah.
pushing and punishing ourselves. Because what you were doing was punishing yourself.
Yeah. And what you just said there, it's so nice because I can do that now for the most part. Fair enough, I have my little things, but it is so nice to be able to. I did so many years, I'm not doing it. If I want that now, sometimes I'll be there and there'll be something I want, and it can take a few minutes sometimes. But I do actually say to myself, do you know what? I actually want that, and I deserve it, and it's going to make me feel good, and I'll do it. And it's really, really, it's so important to do it because the thing about when you're in that eating disorder mindset, you just can't do it. And it's a thing I always find with, and again, as you said, it works for some people to have everything planned out. But if it's been done for a different reason, my worry with that is it's not always sustainable to live your life like that. I often hear people saying, "Oh, get out for a run for your mental health," and like, again, my worry about that with people is that if running is kind of helping you with those mental health challenges, what happens if you can't run? Have you ever sat back and said, "Well, what am I going to do now?" Because that's really important. Because again, it's not sustainable to do it. I mean, for me, I got to the stage with going out and running that I couldn't imagine life without it. I went out when I was injured. I ran. I made so it's really important. I think to if you have something so deep to kind of investigate it and be good to yourself because it's so important. Like, I mean, I did compassion focused therapy for eating disorders, and that was that was a big turning point for me. And I now have that compassion where I can, as you said, enjoy it. Like, at the end of the day, life is relatively short in the scheme of things. And you're like, it's so important just to do it, to enjoy it. And I suppose if anyone, I'd love if anyone is watching this who maybe is kind of in, an eating disorder, has an eating disorder, that I never thought I would ever say that in my life. And I can say it now. So just to say to anyone, you can get to this stage and you deserve to get to this stage.
Mm. And even if you're not sure you can say it, to say to somebody, I think I have a problem, or I think I need support,
Yeah.
or I'm not feeling great. If you're not able to say those words, because sometimes it is the label eating disorder, which people push away from or resist. So
Yeah.
just saying I need support, and whether that's a family or friend, and then going to a GP, and then, finding a therapist that you can work with. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I often talk about this, Sean, and I'm not sure about you when you were younger, but when anybody was suffering with depression, particularly in Ireland years ago, they were told, or we were told as children, they're suffering with their nerves. They had to go
Yeah.
into, and they whispered the name
Yeah.
of the hospital.
Yeah.
So there was the shame and the secrecy in Ireland years ago, as it was in the mother and baby homes and everything else. For you, and that's what I love, that you were in St. Pat's
Yeah.
and you speak very openly about it. What was it like entering St. Pat's for the first time? What was that first initial feeling, even sitting down in a group therapy space? What was it like for you?
Oh, well, yeah, because St. Pat's is obviously, when you say St. Pat's straight away, people know what it is. It was, it's a hard one to describe because I'd never been in hospital really in my life. And the day I was going, I remember sitting in my room, and I kind of, in my bedroom, before I left, and it started to kind of hit me then. And I remember going in, and I sat, I think it was on a Sunday, and I sat down, and very quickly I was with Edel, and we didn't know much about what was going to happen. And very quickly I had to go off on my own. And yeah, it was all very hazy. And then I went into my room where I was going to be staying, and then the nurses came in and they just check everything and make sure, and then it hit me. I was like, oh, hang on. I was like, I thought to myself, how am I going to get through the next 60 seconds here, let alone up to 12 weeks or more? And I was just went into kind of panic mode. I looked around and I was like, oh my God, this, my room here. I noticed little things like the screws on the sockets were anti-tamper type of things and all this. And and I was in this area because the eating disorder board is a bit more restricted. So I think for the first 3 days, I cried. I think I just broke. I had a breakdown. I broke down and I cried for the first 3 days. I just was like, because I felt like I couldn't leave. I felt like I was basically I had to be put in there and I couldn't leave. And I was really paranoid as well because like when your visitors come in at first, the nurses walk you down. I remember standing down and thinking everyone was looking at me who works there because they're expecting me to. And there was that whole thing because I had never been involved with any services like that before. And over time, though, I started to realize like the nurses and everyone in there were absolutely amazing. Uh, they were so incredible, and I was the only male there, so like I was in there, and I think the youngest might have been 19, and then up to maybe late 30s, and that didn't bother me. I didn't, to be honest with you, I was so gone, I didn't notice anything anyway, and it was really, really tough. Like it was so tough because you just feel like you don't have control, and the thing about that is, for me, I needed the control to be taken from me, and you get you're eating with, you go through all the struggles, you're eating with people, but it was a lifesaver for me, and over time, it just made such a difference. It actually became, when you leave. It's funny, when you leave the place, you actually kind of get a bit like anxious, and you kind of miss it. And St. Pat's to me now, for a place that I walked into, and for the first 3 or 4 days, I nearly actually left. I had the whole MTT team there in front of me, and I nearly left. And they were saying to me, "Oh, like just give it until Thursday and see." And I knew then. I says, "Oh." And the nurses were conscious of this. And I remember one of the nurse manager came up to me and basically said to me, he said, Sean, if you leave here, you're going to end up in hospital. You're going to end up, and because you can't do this on your own. And after that, I just kind of let them. I just let them do because at the end of the day, it was now. I felt that it was now or never. And for a place that I had never been involved and caused me so much anxiety the first few days, I actually love the place now. I'm part of service user committee now. I do stuff. I'm doing the webinar with them tomorrow, and I do other things with them as well. And I love the place. It was an amazing place, and the eating disorder area in particular was amazing because you're just with that group of people and sitting with the people in group therapy and stuff. Like, because you speak about things that you used to think, and they're like the same, and they're like, oh, I did as well, and you're just like, I'm not alone, you know what I mean? And it was really I've really fond memories of that. Clara Ward it's called, and yeah, it's funny how things change. Like, my memories are so fond of that, and the people that I was in there with, they were all amazing. Like, I wasn't treated any different. From being in there, they were just like, they were all. Someone asked me inspiration that I had, and as far as being in St. Pat's, those people I was in there with, like, they all inspired me amazingly. It's sad because they were all incredible people, and as I've said before, they were kind of just, their lives were on hold because of this, and some of them couldn't finish their exams and college and stuff, and they're like, these people could be doing anything they wanted to do in life, you know what I mean? So it's sad to see what the eating disorder does. But as you go on, you get used to it so much, it becomes your routine, and it's just being with people who you feel safe. You feel like, I felt like there was a force field around me, and the eating disorder couldn't get me. So for as bad as it is, and when I look back now, anyone going into that situation would feel that way. And I'm proud. I always say I'm really proud of saying I went, because I do know it's generally St. Pat's is known as mental health services historically here, and I'm proud to say that I tell people that I was there, and I do openly kind of say, like, I'll tell people, you know what, like, I do love them. I think they're great, and they really helped me, and they still do.
I love it because, again, the more that somebody has, because somebody outside of it can talk about it, but somebody that has, been supported by the services within, that has the lived experience of being a patient in there, and the honesty of going in and having to surrender control. That's a
Yeah.
huge thing, isn't it? Surrendering control to somebody else, that you can't control this, but you aren't controlling it anyway, because you could have died from this and ended up very, very unwell if you didn't go in. That for other people listening, going, that there are services out there that can support you. And I love that when you set in group therapy, because I love group therapy, and I think
Yeah.
it's the most profound place to meet other people in a similar situation, that have experienced similar thoughts and feelings to you, and you're not alone, and that what you were thinking doesn't make you crazy. It just makes you a human that went through immense struggles in your life, where you felt unsafe in your environment or in your body, and controlling, the only thing you can control was your food and your exercise, that nearly killed you.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful place to have in this country. And again, I know we need more adult beds and more young people beds in this country. So I
Yeah.
think you were an amazing advocate, Sean, in raising the awareness, talking about it, making people aware that there may be an issue with someone they love, and not to be afraid to discuss it, to find out more about it, or to contact organization like Bodywise, or the organizations you mentioned, to find out a little bit more. So when we have the knowledge, it helps us to understand, and again, use the right language around it, as you have said, not to make it all about food, because food is just a symptom of it.
Yeah.
Isn't
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah, and like, unfortunately, I suppose I was lucky. I had private health insurance for St. Pat's and that, and but yeah, there are certainly, like, I mean, the compassion focused therapy that I did, that was group therapy, and you're 100% group therapy is amazing, and the compassion focused therapy was because you you're able to speak amongst people again. And I did a letter to myself, which was a massive turning point for me. And yeah, like obviously everything up to that point, it all contributed, but the compassion focused therapy group was a big thing. And I think the CFT is program is so good. I'd love to see it kind of used more.
Mm.
Uh, but it just kind of it made me realize that look, I am a good person. I do deserve kindness, and it's not my fault. You know what I mean? Whatever
Mm.
has caused this. So yeah, there's so much out there, and I do feel like as well, if we could catch things early, people could get that therapy. You know what I mean? That it might help before we get so far down that road.
Absolutely. I remember on the documentary you reading that letter out and how hard it was to read it out
Yeah.
because the hurt and the pain that you had caused yourself is very apparent when you're reading it. Have you read it since, Sean? How do you?
No, I
No.
haven't, and I know I have like there's clips of it and stuff, and I think I posted one there from the documentary. I don't think I actually looked at myself doing the whole thing because it can be hard sometimes to see myself describing things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know what? I kind of again I take that compassion for myself with it, and I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not going to look at it now because that's going to upset me maybe, so I'm not going
Yeah.
to do it. And I will get to it at some stage, but I'm definitely all for now not doing things that are going to upset me.
Yeah.
Because why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
So, and I will get to certain things to be able to do certain things, and it's like you mentioned about the food. I often see people will have certain food goals and things, but for me, I never. I did. I suppose. Look, I followed the meal plans, but for me, like I wouldn't have a necessary food goal because I need to be able to deal with the repercussions after I eat the food. I need to be able to deal with those emotions because you can eat the food, but unless you know how to deal
Mm.
with that afterwards, it's not really going to be good. So I think it's just all about kind of that kind of compassion for yourself and reflecting on things.
Absolutely, you're so right. Because we could be so hard on ourselves. And there is this thing in society about pushing ourselves forward and striving all of the time. And I like to say, meet yourself where you are today
Yeah,
and be grateful to who you're looking at in the mirror and be nice to that person looking back at you because it's a reflection that's going to greet you every day if
yeah,
you allow yourself to clearly see it and love yourself for who you are.
yeah.
If you went back, Sean, back to your very young self that was being bullied in school, what would you say to him now?
Oh, do you know what? It's funny. We were talking yesterday. I was talking to my little girl, and we were talking about different things. And something I said to her was, I said, you know what? I said, like, uh, never worry about if anyone says anything mean to you or calls you anything mean, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's not you. What they say doesn't matter. Like, and I kind of said to her, look, I actually said, look, I would have been like that. Like when I was younger, I would have worried about things like that, and none of it matters because you are you, and no one can take that away from you. And that's what I would say. And it's just so important that that confidence is there for like. And if I had have been able to say that when I was younger, when I was that age, it might have made a difference. I mean, it's interesting. It's something I didn't say actually. I didn't eat a lot when I was a kid. When I was that age, my parents actually brought me to a GP at the time. But again, it would have been like the '80s, so it wouldn't have been like. So yeah, I'd be just like, you know what, you are good enough, you
Yeah.
know, and that's all. That's all. It's like you are good enough, and
Mm.
it's funny. You go through life, like I said, I'm 43 now, and I'm only coming around to the fact of liking myself as such. And I think
Mm.
if I hadn't have gone through this, I mean, I didn't do a lot of things in life because of that lack of
Mm.
confidence. So I am where I am, like, and I'm making the most of it now. And I'm doing things, like I said, that I've never done before, like social media stuff, which is, so it's good, like in that way. But I definitely do try to tell my kids that sort of give them that message.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you are a wonderful person, Sean,
Thanks.
and it was so wonderful just sharing this conversation with you. As I said, I am connected to you on social media and I get the clips and everything you do. And, I'm so supportive of it. But having these conversations, at length is so powerful because we're getting to know more about you. So the more people that hear you, the more podcasts you do, the more talks you do, out there in the wider world is only going to help and support those that are struggling. So I congratulate you on being where you are. And if
Yeah.
I was to look back to young Sean, I'd say, you might go through a very hard time, but by God, you're going to make a difference in the world. So keep going.
Oh, thanks very much. And look, that's what it's all about, and making connections. And you mentioned Connor Nolan. Like, I read his book and stuff, and those things make the big difference in him doing talks and stuff like that. Like, so there's so much out there to kind of live for, and to so much to learn.
Absolutely. Sean, thank you so much. You're an inspiration, and I mean that. And I wish you success with everything you do. And when you were talking about Connor's book, I was saying, where's Sean's book? When is that coming?
Oh, it'll take a long time. I have so much going on. I mean,
Well,
going on in my past that I wouldn't even know where to start. I could make a movie out of 10 movies.
I always say, a book starts with writing a page a day.
Yeah,
And if
that's
you
true.
write a page a day, you have 365 pages written in a year. Just
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of it
yeah.
that way.
Yes, exactly. You never know. You might see something.
I'm looking forward to it. So, everybody, that was the wonderful Sean Blake, which you can go over and follow on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Are you on Facebook as well, Sean?
I'm on Facebook, but I don't really, I don't even know my username. So yeah, my main is Instagram. So to
And
be honest
LinkedIn.
with you, I struggle with social media. Instagram was a lot to take at one stage. I'll look at the other ones another time.
Well, Instagram is fine for all of us because that's how I found you. And again, check out all the information I will be adding to the show notes as well. And if anybody, as I said, is struggling themselves or a family member, please check out Bodywise and the Eating Disorders Association of Ireland. They have a helpline 01210 7906, or the other ones you mentioned were, what was the other one you
Uh,
mentioned, Sean?
so Beat UK have information, and I think it's the NEDC possibly. I always forget the
Yeah,
name in Australia. So it's like it's a national eating disorder in Australia, and they have amazing information and resources for like sports clubs for everyone. So you check that out as well.
brilliant. Thank you so much. So, Sean, we are saying farewell for now, but I look forward to watching your future progress and your wonderful life that you've now given yourself the opportunity to live fully. And I'll be looking forward to the book. We'll say no more about that because it'll be coming, I'm sure, soon.
Yes,
So thank
thanks.
you again, Sean, for everything. And thank you to all of you for listening. Please do go and follow Sean Blake over on Instagram. And I said, if anything that we have mentioned in the podcast has triggered you in any way, please do reach out for support to your local GP, counselling service, or body wise. So until next time, take care of you.